Welcome to all of you in Korea and around the world. I am Kim Jae-chun. President Lee Myung-bak attended the 19th APEC Summit in Hawaii on November 13th and held discussions with the heads of other member nations on seamless regional economy. The president is then scheduled to attend a Korea-ASEAN Summit and an ASEAN Plus 3 Summit on the 18th, as well as an East Asia Summit the following day. On today's In Focus, we'll discuss these important meetings in detail with our expert guests. Joining me today are Professor Jae-chun. Professor Jeon is Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the Seoul National University. And also Dr. Tae-yoon. Dr. Kim is working for the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy. Welcome to the program, both of you.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Kim, some of the important multilateral summit meetings are taking place in the Asia-Pacific recently. I think we should start with this APEC Summit meeting, which was held in Honolulu last weekend. Right. This was the 19th APEC Summit meeting of the APEC leaders.
Yes.
So can you talk about some of the major agendas of this year's APEC Summit meeting?
Okay. As you talked about before, the basic theme is the seamless regional economy. Of course, there are main issues like increasing their regional integrations and strengthening their economic trade, including the investment and also service corporations, and also they are focused on the green growth development, which is also our Korean government main issue in these days. And another issue is the regulations. President Lee Myung-bak also explained Korean government's effort toward regulation and competitiveness. Also, he highlighted the business importance through their creativity and their economic innovations for their Korean job creations. These are main theme in that APEC Summit.
I see. So I guess how we can stimulate economic growth and also how we can create jobs was also one of the major themes of this year's
APEC
correct. Summit. Professor Jeon, I think this APEC Summit meeting was very special in the sense that it was taking place in the middle of this global economic crisis. So did the leaders of APEC Summit talk about the ways in which they can sort of safeguard this region from this ongoing economic crisis?
Yeah. These APEC nations also seriously affected by the current global economic crisis. So how can they survive? That's the key issue. So they have to protect from the kind of deteriorating economic situation, and they have to find the way how to promote exporting or trading within the region. And they know economic growth is the key.
Growth is the key.
Yeah, but it's not easy though. But this APEC's region is very important and very powerful forum and institution because they produce half of global domestic products, GDP, and half of trading volumes comes from these areas, and also they occupy about 40% of full population of the world. So they are getting stronger and stronger. So the APEC Summit meeting convened at the proper time, as you mentioned, in the middle of especially European economic crisis. So now emerging nations, they are also interested and they are concerned and they are worried about this kind of negative, trend. So I hope they could find solutions, but you can't solve at a time. But anyway, they discussed this matter and how to integrate the regional economy.
And it seems that
how to promote
the leaders came to an agreement that the key to protecting this region from this
also,
economic crisis
so
the
not
continuous growth.
losing the engine power, so keep going. That's what they wanted. And the United States hosted this meeting, so President Obama said a lot of summit meeting agenda. So we could see the design and their perspectives and also their, ways how to solve this problem. But this time, probably Japan, did steal the show with the TPP. They expressed the intention to join. And inevitably, United States and China collided. So conflict is...
Maybe we can talk a little bit more about the rivalry between the U.S. and China. Speaking of TPP, Dr. Kim, President Obama took great pains to promote what is dubbed as TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. And he was trying to launch charm offensive to other member nations of APEC to sell this TPP, and during the meeting, TPP took the center stage. I mean, it was attracting huge media attention in the region during the entire course of the meeting. So, can you elaborate more on what TPP is and the implications of TPP when it takes effect in the region?
Well, for example, the many people knows the FTA, which is a bilateral agreement between two nations. Also, it has a trade agreement as well as service and investment agreement. Regard to the TPP, this is also like a multilateral FTAs, including many member nations. Right now, it has around 9 members before the APEC Summit, but now Japan, Mexico, and Canada show their interest to participate in this TPP regime. Regarding this TPP regime, it requires a high level of concession of all products, including agricultural products, which is a little bit sensitive to, like in Japan country, including also Korea. If they open whole market, including agricultural product, probably there will be many demonstrations in their nations. So if the Japan's interest to joining in TPP will create their economic growth. However, there might be some negative impact from their people. So probably there will be big issues later on, to protect their farmers or their weakness of their economy. So these are a little bit controversial issues regarding TPP. However, regarding the United States, they are suffering from a global finance crisis, and they are losing their job market, so they like to expand their economic length through those TPP regime. So it can be a good tool for USA to expand their economy and also their power.
I think the issue of TPP is very important, so I'd like to get back to the issue of TPP a little later. But in the meantime, let's talk a little bit about the Honolulu Declaration that the leaders of the APEC Summit adopted after they concluded this meeting.
Professor 13th,
19th, Any parts of the declaration that you found worth noting?
Well, anyway, they include how to strengthening our regional economy. That means integration of regional economy, going more toward liberalization rather than protecting or insisting autonomy, sovereignty. So moving from the kind of sovereignty toward a community. It's a communitarian solution. That's important. So it will free trade and investment. And also they will urge kind of reform needed. For instance, some country like China has many things to, amend or reform to reform. For instance, yuan valuation, for instance, or some intellectual property rights, or subsidizing their economic enterprises forms. So United States keep pinpointing that kind of issue until you are ready to join us. Not yet. So China is not happy with that. China thinks United States is checking China's emerging power and influence within the region.
I see.
Honolulu Declaration also includes our tourists in a convenient way to enter the United States, waiving what's that interview. You can go through the passport control easily rather than showing everything and answering. So it'll be much easier now for Korean tourists.
I see. So the declaration emphasized the importance of openness, open trade, and clean energy.
In one word, it's liberal, liberalizing, regional economic cooperation and exchanges.
Dr. Kim, I think one notable thing about this year's APEC Summit is the attitude of the United States. As I said earlier, President Obama went great length to emphasize how important this Asia-Pacific is to the United States. Is APEC that important to the United States? I mean, is APEC that important? How important is APEC, and how influential is APEC?
Regarding the economic issues, is very important. They made sort of the TPP agreement. They also asked Canada and Japan and Mexico to join the TPP regime. It can be a good framework to boost their economic and trade. However, when we look at the EU case compared to APEC Summit, EU has their political and economic union. But in APEC case, APEC is sort of the forum for 21 Pacific Rim nations. They don't have any mandatory mechanism to cope together with the global financial difficulties. So with that regard, their influence is not as great as other regional mechanism. However, with that TPP regime, it can be boost their economic cooperations among member nations. One thing that I can tell, also Professor Jung also mentioned about China. China is also actively involved in Southeast Asian regions rather than APEC Summit regarding TPP. But their main argument is they are focusing on WTO or DDA rather than APEC Summit, which might be a leg of this TPP framework. So we can see later if China can join this TPP regime or not.
But maybe the role of and influence of APEC might grow more because Europe and the United States are going through the economic crisis, I think.
That's correct. In a sense, where if there is an economic crisis, then this regime might be bigger. The role of this regime might be bigger. However, there's no legitimacy right now, and there's no mandatory mechanism to require member nations to act something. In that regard, it's not so influential compared to EU or some other like FTA.
The U.S. intention to enlarge this zone of TPP angered Chinese very much.
The region, Asia-Pacific region, has become so important.
Yes.
United States pay more attention.
But to the surprise of many people, Japan's Prime Minister Noda said that Japan is more than willing to participate in this TPP negotiations. How significant? What are the implications of this Japan's decision?
Some says United States #1, and Japan is #3. So if they join, combine, it's very powerful, for us. That's why China is so nervous now. They don't want to be left out. They don't want to be, checked by these combined forces. And now the United States is paying attention to the Southeast Asia. So China feels squeezed. So they complain and they try to overcome that kind of obstacles or pressures.
So is it also true that Japan has been very hesitant about this free trade agreement in the region?
Japanese economy has been very bad during the last more than 10 years. We call lost decade. After lost decade, Japanese economy is not improving yet. So not much choice is left. For instance, automobile industry, though, people cannot, compete with other countries. For instance, South Korea just president, we got some kind of blue ocean strategy.
So Japan is hard pressed to.
Yeah, as Dr. Kim mentioned, probably Japanese agricultural sectors oppose this kind of move.
Yeah.
But Japan has to survive too.
Dr. Kim, now the APEC Summit is over, but there are 3 more important summit meetings scheduled to take place in Indonesia very shortly. And I think all these summit meetings involve the ASEAN. So what are these 3 summit meetings?
Okay, there are summit like ASEAN plus Korean Summit and ASEAN plus 3 Summit and East Asia Summit. And this year included Russia and United States, of course. Well, regarding those issues, I like to emphasize on the ASEAN's importance to Korea. Of course, when previously our first trading partner was China, of course. Right now, in 2010, our second trading partner is ASEAN. I just looked up the data in our website, and in 2010, our trade volume with ASEAN is around almost $100 billion, which exceeded the EU's trade about $92.2 billion. And so in 2010, this year, you can expect more than $100 billion, which is almost more than 10% of our trade volume. So ASEAN is a very our good trading partner right now. And regarding our investment, ASEAN is one of our largest investment destinations. When I look at the data, in 2010, Korea invested almost $4.3 billion on ASEAN, which is almost 20% of Koreans' investment. And also, ASEAN is not underdeveloped country, developing countries, and there are many resources which is not developed. So that we can see future promising or sort of emerging market as ASEAN. They have also like a key source of oil and natural gas and timber. So probably our government expect this summit will create more economic cooperations between ASEAN and Korea. Also, ASEAN plus other East Asian nations.
I see. So at this year's Korea-ASEAN Summit meeting, since ASEAN is very, very important, economic partner to Korea, so the leaders will probably talk about the ways in which they can deepen this economic relations. Let's talk a little bit about the EAS, East Asia Summit. As you just said, Russia and the United States became new member countries to this EAS. What is expected for this year's EAS?
Well, last year, the EAS Summit agreed to have new member of EU and USA and Russia. Well, this is because of the U.S. Active involvement in Southeast Asian nations or East Asian nations. The previous government, they sort of neglect the Southeast Asians or East Asian economic corporations. As a result, when you look at these days data, the China's economic influence on East Asia or Southeast Asia is bigger and bigger. So in 2009, the USA studied sort of the environment of developing the Southeast Asian nations in order to reduce the development gap among ASEAN nations, which is called the Raw Mekong Initiative. They have focused on education and infrastructure and health and environment. That is a starting point of U.S. participation in Southeast Asian nations. And now they joined the East Asia Summit, so that they trying to more get involved in Southeast Asian nations through the economic corporations. At that time, last year, China also agreed this issue. So, as we know, in G2 period, they are still competing with each other in Southeast Asian countries. Yeah.
Lastly, Dr. Kim, what would be the proper role of Korea in its relations to APEC countries and all these ASEAN nations?
Well, in Korea, Korea is a small country, and we have lack of resources. So in order to create more jobs, or in order to create more economic growth, we need to cooperate with other nations through this APEC regime or ASEAN FTA regime. Right now, we are a member of APEC, so we should also actively involved in these issues. If we can join the TPP, then it might be great. However, right now, the agriculture issue is a little bit sensitive to also Korea, so it's hard to implement those regime. However, we need to cooperate with APEC in order to have more influentials through the political issue or economic corporations. Regarding ASEAN, as I mentioned before, ASEAN is our emerging markets. They have around 600 million populations. Their annual economic growth is more than 6% these days, which means it can be a huge market for Korean company as well as the Korean government. ASEAN is also our good neighbors regarding our official development assistance. Korea developed best than other nations. So we can give our experience to the ASEAN countries so that they can develop more. If that is ongoing by help of the Koreans, then our friendship with ASEAN will be bigger, which means Korean companies' role is bigger than before. And another issue is, because of course China, we depend a lot on China's economy. We export more, our trade volume is almost, China is more than 20% of our total trade. So in order to diversify our economic structure, we need to also cooperate with other nations like ASEAN or EU or other countries. So these are a little bit economic strategy regarding to Korea.
I see. Very briefly, Dr. Chun, what would be your policy recommendation to Korea with regard to this multilateral dialogues?
Well, we have to actively participate. We are an export-oriented country. It is our matter of survival. And also, we need cooperation to keep this kind, tendency just last long enough. But we have also some problems. We need, as you mentioned, we need cooperation or help from other countries. Although we are economically strong, we lack our important resources like oil and other materials. So we have to sometimes provide some assistance or that kind of stuff. Kind of mutual, what's that? Mutual help or win-win approach.
We have to develop mutually beneficial
that kind
relationship
of approach. Otherwise, they will turn away.
Okay.
So we should not let it happen. And second, we are in between China and the United States. Both are very important for Korea's survival and prosperity. How to keep our close relations with the United States. I mean, alliance. As our President Lee Myung-bak mentioned, not only security alliance, defense alliance, but also we got economic alliance. FTA with the United States means that kind of thing. So we have to pay much attention to very sensitive issue of alliance, although alliance can be changed, but fundamental should be there. And second, we need China, as you mentioned already, trading volume reached 200 billion, right? US dollars. So last time, our president and Chinese President Hu Jintao said we're going to upgrade this to the $300 billion. That means a lot, really. So we need both countries. How to, keep good relations with both. It is art.
So more than anything else, we need close cooperation between two big
good neighbor
giants.
country, also good close alliance with the United States.
Okay.
So we have to pay much attention. We have to do a lot of research on that, and we have to keep adjusting to the changing security environment.
Okay.
That's very important.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your insights today. Thank you very much.